During World War I, the aviation world was still in its infancy. Designers were still figuring out what did or didn't work, and this produced some interesting results. One of these was the Twin Blackburn. In 1915, the British Admiralty was looking for a solution to the so-called Zeppelin menace. At the time, the airships of the German Army and Navy were casually floating through the British skies in relative safety, the power, climb rate, and range of British fighters not being quite enough to get at them yet. As a result of this, the Admiralty issued a requirement for a two-seat plane capable of long endurance and an ability to reach an altitude of at least 12,000 feet. In terms of armament, this new aircraft was not intended to use guns to shoot down the Zeppelin. It would instead fly up and over the airship and bomb it. This would be achieved with the use of the Rankine incendiary dart, which when dropped would pierce the airship's outer envelope and ignite the explosive gas bags within. At this time, the Blackburn Company was very new to the aviation field. Their main experience thus far had been building Farnborough-designed BE-2s and Sopwith Cuckoos, but they had rapidly developed a good working relationship with the Admiralty and felt confident enough to submit their first true military design. Known as the TB, or Twin Blackburn, it was a curious design, being a biplane that had not one but two fuselages. These were joined at the front by a 10-foot centre section and at the rear by a single large tailplane. From the outset, it was designed as a seaplane, and the fuselages were supported on the water by two pairs of floats on bungee-sprung mounts. These floats were set forward of the centre of gravity, and so a pair of small floats were also attached to the bottom of the tail to keep it out of the water. The two wings were arranged without stagger, constructed of spruce spars and ribs, and the ailerons were placed on the upper wing only. The upper wing also had a considerably greater span, and because of this it had to be braced using wired king posts. To make design and construction of the aircraft easier, and because they had the parts, the twin fins and rudders were taken from the BE-2, which was already being produced by Blackburn. The choice of a twin fuselage design had been made on account of the requirement for long range, as having two fuselages meant you had double the fuel capacity, and providing your engines were efficient enough, you would therefore have better range. This need for efficiency meant that Blackburn were very interested by the arrival of the American John W. Smith, who brought with him the design for a 10-cylinder radial engine. An engine he claimed that would only weigh 380 pounds and produce 150 horsepower, whilst maintaining a very low fuel consumption. Apparently, the Admiralty was in a generous, or desperate mood in 1915, for not only did they accept an unorthodox design from a company with almost zero military experience, but they accepted it to be powered by an engine that had never been used, or let alone tested on British soil. All in all, 9 of the TB biplanes were ordered, whilst Smith's new engine went through a rapid series of bench tests. Unsurprisingly, this new engine with fabled performance figures turned out to be pretty rubbish. When tested with an experimental AD Navy plane and a Vickers FB5, the Smith engine not only proved to be underpowered, but also pretty inefficient. And so 8 of the 9 TBC planes were completed with known monosapap rotary engines, and the 9th was fitted with 110 horsepower Clerjets. The first and last models of the production batch of 9 were sent to undergo trials at RNAS Isle of Grain in 1916. This proved to be a somewhat terrifying experience for test pilot J.W. Seddon and his observer E.W. Stedman, the latter of which actually recorded the experience in his memoirs. The pilot sat in one fuselage with all the flying and engine controls, while the observer sat several feet away in the other, with no controls except the starting handle for the engine on his side. Starting on the water needed discipline, courage, and agility, for a pool of excess petrol, which formed on the float when the engine was primed, promptly ignited when said engine fired. The observer's job during takeoff, in a scene that wouldn't be out of place in an episode of Dad's Army, was to lie on the lower center section and put out the fire on the pilot's side with an extinguisher, scramble into his own cockpit to start the second engine, and then leap out again to extinguish the second fire on his side, before finally getting in again for takeoff. Once in the air, and hopefully not on fire, the aircraft proved difficult to handle as the flexing of the wing caused the aileron cables to slacken, which resulted in an almost total loss of lateral control. This design flaw, though alarming, was soon fixed. However, there was still a disconcerting amount of relative movement between the fuselages caused by the flexing of the wire-braced center section. Along with being uncomfortably wobbly, the TB was still underpowered, even with the new engines, only being able to achieve 2/3 of the desired power output. As a result of this, the military load had to be reduced to just 70 pounds of Rankin darts. Not that it ever got a chance to actually use its weapons against the Zeppelins. The first major problem was that the crew of the TB were limited to hand signalling for communication. Not an ideal arrangement when in action against enemy airships that, sometimes had guns on them. And the second problem was that of altitude. By the time the TB was complete, it was clear that the whole idea of attempting to attack approaching airships with bomber-type planes, which had little margin in the way of speed or maneuverability, was badly flawed. Especially when it was then discovered that the airships could simply outclimb the planes by jettisoning ballast and going to an altitude above the plane's ceiling. And so within a not too short time frame, the Admiralty realised that there was little use for the Blackburn TB. 4 were briefly used at RNAS Killinghome, where they terrified everyone, but by the end of 1916 they were all put in storage and eventually broken up as scrap in August 1917. I'd like to say that Blackburn's next attempt at a military aircraft was more sensible, but the AD Sparrow was anything but that. However, that's a story for another day. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.